Everybody, Rose Matter here, and welcome to part 1 of my Higurashi When They Cry Minagoroshi Let's Play. Hopefully I'm saying that correctly. So the last chapter was absolutely amazing, and this one, based on the little thumbnail icon I have, it's a girl that I don't think we've ever met before. So this should be interesting. It looks like it's going to be introducing a new character, so I have no idea what to expect from this. But yeah, we're going to get right into it, and we're going to see what this chapter will have in store for us, so let's go. Oh, whoa, what is this? Massacre chapter. What? This story introduces the unit inside and out using all the actors. And there's, again, the thing about actors and scripts. They were really going into that at the end of the last chapter. So I'm like, is this all just... is this a play? Like, what's going on with this? Anyway, this is no longer a story. It is a public autopsy for all to join. So I guess we're going to pick it apart and see. As they say, after loving someone, cut open their belly and eat their organs. Is that what they say? Who says that? It's the same with stories. The difficulty is quite mild, well suited for those with pride. Okay, well, Massacre Chapter, Autopsy, Organs. Interesting. Alright, let's get into it. This is very different than I'm used to. What are you doing? I don't see you playing by yourself that often. All you could do before was to nod to my questions. Since when do you have your own will? I'm glad. I finally have a sister or a brother. Whichever you are. I used to be an existence of nothingness, just like you. But one day I began to have my own identity, my own thoughts, and eventually my own body. So it's not a surprise to see you in possession of your own will. Welcome to this vast yet tiny world, my sister. Okay, so I'm wondering, is this that girl that keeps talking to Rika that we never actually see? And she kind of looks like Rika a little bit. She's got like purple hair. So is she Rika's sister who maybe died? And maybe Rika's talking to like a ghost or an entity or something? You might be my brother, but let me call you my sister until I know for sure. Look at this. I'm like 2 minutes in and I'm already like, you know, putting theories out there. I should just let the game just tell me more information. This is an endless, eternal, and infinite world. But that doesn't mean it's boundlessly vast. I suppose you could describe it like a ring with a small diameter. While the ring is an eternal, endlessly looping world, that doesn't mean it contains infinite space. Yes, in short, this world is eternally sealed. The future is supposed to be an infinite weave of countless choices. Yet for whatever reason, our world always ends in death. If I were to compare it to something, perhaps a maze of fate would be appropriate. Looping through these same moments forever steadily grows harder and more dejecting, eventually producing something like me. Then as that draws further on, even one like you is born, and eventually this world may be filled with your sisters too. After that, we'll build a colony inside of it, and once we lose our interest in this maze, Rika Ferde will disappear from this world. It looks like you still cling to this narrow world, Rika. Though I lost interest long ago. Which is why I'm truly glad you were born for me to talk to. So what are you doing? What is this? Are you collecting fragments of memory? There's only 5 or 6 of them right now. Oh, 5 or 6, like the 5 or 6 chapters. It must still be fun for you, though. There used to be more fragments long ago. But one by one they disappeared into the darkness. Now, these are the only ones that remain clear. Oh, that's not how you're supposed to use it. See? Try and hold it up to the light. All of that is the life of Rika Ferde and its end. This is like blowing my mind. What is this? That one is... oh, I remember that one. That's the world where Keiichi was cursed. Those fragments are like books to me. So I titled that one Onakakushi chapter. Oh my gosh, so this is like this entity. It's like the books are like the alternate timelines. Yes. Do you remember what happened in that one? Good. That makes things easier. This is so funky. In Onakakushi, Keiichi Maibara was consumed by the darkness. He couldn't accept the kind words his friends offered him and eventually beat them to death, not knowing of their kindness. I guess this one is going to be kind of going through all the chapters and just like reminding us what happened in each one. We were all killed after that anyway. That had nothing to do with his story though. I'm guessing this girl has got to be the one that Rika talks to. That fragment is the Watanagashi chapter. Shion Sonozaki was cursed in that one. She killed many people out of revenge for her boyfriend's disappearance as he went missing in 1982. Rika worked so hard, but she was captured at the end and she was tortured to death. That's why she chose to commit suicide in the Miyakashi chapter, because things were going to turn out the same way. Oh, Miyakashi, crap, which one is that one? That fragment over there is called the Higurashi chapter. Now I've got to remember what each chapter, how they're pronounced. Sadako's uncle came back and locked her up inside her house. Oh wait, yeah, the Miyakashi one is where she stabbed herself with the knife, that's right. That was the worst world of all. There was nothing Rika was able to do in that world. And that was the one, I think, where we first saw her, the only time we saw her actually splayed out and, you know, all of her organs out, but it's implied that it happens each time. Whenever Sadako's uncle comes back, Rika usually just gives up on that world. Fortunately, Sadako's uncle doesn't come back that frequently. That one is called the Tsumui Horoboshi chapter. Rika was there until just a moment ago. Rena Ryugu was possessed in that world. It was pretty exciting to see her take over the whole school. It surprised me to learn Keiichi Maibara had a memory of the other worlds, just like we do. It was pretty amazing, but then again, most of us have some kind of memory like that. We all have an imaginary world within us, some idea of what would have happened if you did things differently. It's like the strange feeling you get when you do something for the first time, but it feels like you've done it before. Everyone has a memory of an imaginary world in their mind, but the memory is not always that clear. It's not surprising, really. You're special enough to be able to see those fragments of memory. It's probably very difficult for you to understand how special you really are. You were born into a world where it's a natural thing for you to see these fragments. I was originally born in the normal world. I didn't know until recently I could collect these fragments of memory. You grab those fragments just because you could, but I didn't know how to do that for a long time. I'm sorry. I'm sure you're not interested in hearing my story. Huh? What's wrong? What are you curious about? Oh? You're curious as to why so many different incidents occur in the same world? I'm assuming she's talking to the audience. Hee hee. It's very interesting, isn't it? Why do you think that's the case? Let's think about it together. Thinking is the first step towards playing a game. The main character among Rika's group of friends is Keiichi Maibara. In Onakakushi, he was possessed by suspicion and killed Rena Ryugu and Mion Sonozaki. If that was an inevitable event, he would be killing them in every world. In other words, what Keiichi Maibara did in Onakakushi was not inevitable. Indeed, the only thing that's inevitable is Keiichi Maibara's role. Once again, the thing about main character roles, I'm just like, this is so fourth wall breaking. If Keiichi Maibara was someone with a naturally suspicious heart, he would take the same actions in every world. But that didn't happen. It's true Keiichi Maibara is both passionate and easily convinced of anything, but it's rare for him to exhibit the kind of rage he displayed in Onakakushi. In other words, even though something might seem inevitable in one world, that may not be the case if you compare it to a different one. If something really is inevitable, it will happen for sure in every life. That's what true inevitability is like. It's very important that you know that. When you compare the different worlds, what's common among all of them is the truth. Understand? No. Like I said, what seems inevitable in one life could just be a random event in another. The club activities that Mion Sonozaki suggests are a good example. If Mion Sonozaki had a strong inclination towards playing certain games, you would be playing them in every world. But in reality, you participate in different activities in most of them. That means that the games they play in the club are randomly decided by Mion Sonozaki. We know that now because we've been through many different lives. Those who only live in one world can't see if the event in question is inevitable or random. Those who only live once can't predict what's going on in Mion Sonozaki's mind, but we can. Although the activities are random, Mio and Sonozaki calls us together for the club meeting almost every day in every life. I can see Mio and Sonozaki holds a strong will towards having the club meeting. Mio and Sonozaki always wants to play with the other club members, but she doesn't know what to play. See? We can read Mio and Sonozaki's mind just by simply examining these fragments. With this alone, we can see part of who Mio and Sonozaki really is. Let me talk a bit more about Keiichi Maibara. For those who only live once, the world of the Onakakashi chapter is nothing but a story where Keiichi suffered mysterious hallucinations and beat his friends to death. For them, there's nothing beyond that fact. We, however, can compare different fragments and find out something they could never see. As a result, we know that the murder of his friends was not inevitable. I told you that just earlier. In fact, while there are about 5 or 6 pieces in front of you, he only kills his friends in one of them. That means we can roughly conclude that the possibility Keiichi Maibara triggers that tragedy is less than 20%, and is almost a fluke. This means that among the countless worlds, Keiichi Maibara causing the tragedy is an unimportant factor. Now, can you find the common thread to be drawn from here? My, you found it already? No wonder you were born in this world. You're quick to learn the knack for playing with building blocks. I didn't figure that out for a while. I was born in the normal world, so I could only see things from a single world's perspective. I was too obsessed with the fact that Keiichi Maibara caused the tragedy, so I had trouble finding it. Right. That's exactly right. You see it? The Onakakashi, Watanagashi, Miyakashi, and Sumui Horoboshi chapters all have something in common. Someone in the group becomes violent because of dark and paranoid thoughts. In each world, either Keiichi Maibara, Shion Sonozaki, or Ren and Ryugu become violent as their delusions grew stronger. Keiichi Maibara, Shion Sonozaki, and Ren and Ryugu are all my close friends, but they were born and raised differently. Okay, so this must be Rika talking then. The only common factor is they all live in Hinamizawa. I just said it not long ago, though. When we peer through these fragments of multiple worlds, the constant phenomena becomes our facts, and the chance phenomena hold little meaning. In other words, the unrelated individual culprits are not that important. To go further, the violence of their crimes also bears no meaning. Keiichi Maibara beat his friends to death. Shion Sonozaki killed the central people of the 3 families, and Ren and Ryugu took over the school. They were all different. There's nothing in common there. In fact, the very, very important truth is, while the culprit in crimes are decided at random, their process of growing paranoia until they resort to violence is always constant. So it seems that the constant is Hinamizawa itself. Is that what they're implying? Although Shion doesn't technically live in Hinamizawa, so I don't know if that's really the case. The suspect changes every time, but the process does not. After comparing the different worlds, this is the truth I found. This is one truth that is common to all the worlds of Hinamizawa. The rule is a random person becomes violent under the influence of paranoid thoughts. This is Rule X. Keiichi Maibara, Shion Sonozaki, and Ren and Ryugu, pieces with no particular connection, have the potential to succumb to that rule with random probability. I don't know what the probability is that those pieces will be ensnared by that rule. Perhaps there is some rule to that too. Is it because these 3 are all close in age? Or is it because they all live in Hinamizawa? Oh, well, we're not detectives or police officers. This is not something that a small girl like us, Rika Furude, can easily figure out. At least we now know there's a mysterious rule in the world of Hinamizawa, so are we playing as Rika in this chapter, or are we playing as this other girl? People who only live in one world have no way of knowing that. I'm proud of myself for figuring that out. I guess for you it's not particularly surprising, though. Huh? What did you say? That's right. If something is common among all worlds, that means it's fated to happen. Hee hee hee. Some events quickly come to mind, don't they? Right. Jiro Toмотake and Mio Takano were always killed in those worlds. On top of that, they are murdered in exactly the same way in every world. In other words, unlike our previous rule with its variability, their murders are thoroughly planned out by someone with a strong will. So that does not fit with the mysterious vague Rule X that leads to a random individual to violence. After all, they are always murdered regardless of who falls to Rule X. Therefore, there's another rule to these worlds, a rule that says Jiro Toмотake and Mio Takano will get killed on the night of Oh my gosh, why am I having such a hard time with words today? Watanagashi. Let's call it Rule Y. Hee hee. Don't you see how funny this is? They were not kidding about this basically being like an autopsy and peeling things back and really going into detail. Like right off the hop, this chapter is like laying things out for us. Jiro Tomatake and Mio Takano are killed in every world, right? Every time, the character who gets cursed always thinks their deaths have something to do with the danger that's awaiting them. The fact that someone turns violent, Rule X, and Jiro Tomatake and Mio Takano's deaths, Rule Y, are supposed to be two independent rules, but they all tend to link them together. Of course, one could say that's how they become ensnared in the spell of paranoia leading them to violence to begin with. But do you think in their paranoia that they notice someone is trying to lead them to link those rules together? Yes. Whoever the piece leading them is, they are the one making the stage called Hinamizawa very complicated. You should have noticed at least two suspicious people. Do you know who I'm talking about? That's right. Oh, I'm referring to Kuroda Oishi and Mio Takano. When you compare our previous fragments, the role of the piece known as Kuroda Oishi becomes clear. He's a detective who is retiring this year, and he's in a hurry to solve the mystery of the series of deaths in Hinamizawa. After he retires, he'll have to move away from the village. That's why he's desperate to solve the case before he has to leave Hinamizawa. Why is he so obsessed with the serial murders in Hinamizawa? That's right. It's because of the first murder involving the manager of the construction site. The victim was Oishi's close friend. You'll see that if you look at the Himatsubushi chapter. Oishi was there when the dam conflict was at its peak. He saw how the Sonozaki family took control of the Onagafuchi Guardians, and he believed the Sonozaki family was pulling the strings behind the whole incident. That's why he always suspected that the Sonozaki family was behind the series of mysterious deaths, regardless of the evidence or lack thereof. His personal biased belief, combined with his credibility as a police detective, affected the pitiable victims of persecution complexes in each world. As a result, the pitiful victims of Rule X came to accept the Sonozaki family as the identity of the unknown force their paranoia seeks. Shion Sonozaki's case was the most conspicuous one in that matter. So yes, if this piece Oishi didn't intervene, then perhaps the victims of Rule X wouldn't have resorted to such violence. I didn't think about that Oishi kind of is... He always plays a part in giving that belief that the Sonozakis are behind everything. So the role his piece plays is to indirectly cause the tragedy. I don't know who named him this, but Oishiro-sama's servant is the perfect nickname for Oishi. Ooh, interesting. Like, I'm guessing that's indirectly, like he doesn't mean for that to happen, it just indirectly happens because of his persuasion. The other suspicious person is Mio Takano. Yeah, she is very suspicious. One would assume the only role of her piece is to amuse herself with research into Onagafuchi's dreadful history and to take pleasure in scaring others with those tales, but it's true, just like Oishi with the Sonozakis, it's her putting that idea of Oishiro-sama into people's heads. However, just like Oishi, she also gives them the idea that the Sonozaki family is behind all the mysterious incidents that happen in the village. She interfered the most with Rena Ryugu. For Mio Takano, Rena Ryugu was the perfect prey, grasping at straws to try and identify the force she suspected. Ironically, however, Mio Takano always ends up getting killed at the end. If she had survived and seen Rena take over the school, she would have laughed long and loud. Now have you realized that these two pieces and the role they fulfill have their own rule too? They talk about the Sonozaki family and the listeners always believe them. This is Rule Z, and what a humorous rule it is. You should already have an answer to this mystery in your fragments on hand. The fact is that the Sonozaki family always acts as if they're responsible no matter if they are or not. They always pretend to be the villains in order to make sure people continue to fear them. As a result, the villagers have believed that the Sonozaki family have been pulling their strings ever since the dam conflict ended. Kuroda Oishi and Mio Takano were simply fooled by that rule. Actually, the whole village is fooled by it. Still, the more I think about it, the stranger the series of mysterious deaths in Hinamizawa seems to me. Hee hee hee. Do you know why? Nearly all the fragments of memories we have here are from 1983, so I have no idea about the incidents from 1980 to 1982. but it's likely that interpreting these murders as serial is simply a result of following victim to Rule Z, believing that the Sonozaki family is pulling the strings behind everything. In short, they may be trying to conflate those multiple crimes, which each happen for different reasons, into one big case. Well, I have no way of discerning the truth from the fragments here. Still, perhaps something lies in one of them. Each case was supposed to have been solved individually, after all. We don't know if that theory is sound or irrational, but it might surprisingly be an element we can't ignore. Ooh, are we going to go back in time and are we going to go into those years that kind of got glossed over? Because the only time we really went back in time was with the Akasaka chapter. So it'd be interesting to see, like, if we're going to go back between Akasaka meeting Rika and, when we always start the chapters in 1983, and maybe see what happened. That reminds me, Shion said something intriguing in the Miyakashi chapter. That curse system she came up with. Do you remember that? Her theory was that the villagers believe they are allowed to kill an enemy of the village on the night of Watanagashi in the name of Oyashiro-sama's curse. And that this foundation of murder is allowed on that night alone is the true identity of the curse. Since most of the fragments here are from 1983, there's nothing to back the validity of Shion's theory, but there are still interesting things about it. In other words, her theory is that the suspect is not the one who's committing the crime. It's the environment that's causing the murder. People in a single world tend to analyze a criminal's life to determine the process that led them to crime, but her idea is different. The real crime is committed not by the criminals, but by the environment. In other words, it may only be happenstance that Robber A committed the crime, and the environment of poverty may have created Robber B instead, or perhaps even Robber C. A may not even be a criminal in another world. Therefore, the real criminal is not A, but the environment that creates A, B, or C. And well, while people in a single world may be able to reach such an idea, the widespread desire to place blame commonly causes A to be lynched by society when the environment that gives rise to A goes ignored. Oh boy, this is getting into some real deep territory that is, they're not totally wrong about that, you definitely apply that to real life. Did I confuse you? I'm sorry. Perhaps that example was actually harder to understand for you. It's easy for me to see it like that because I'm from the normal world. Let me make it more simple for you. The culprit behind the tragedy in many worlds isn't individuals like Keiichi Maibara or Shion Sonozaki, but the environment. So Rule X is the true culprit at fault. You're earning good marks if you can grasp that, even if we don't know the identity of Rule X. And if you can grasp the 3 rules governing the stage called Hinamizawa, rules X, Y, and Z, then you're earning very good marks. So long as you understand those rules, then even if this is your first experienced world, you should easily find the truth without distraction. See? Isn't it fun? Merely 3 simple rules are interacting on this stage, creating a kaleidoscope of different worlds. This is probably a very unusual case. In other locations, you shouldn't be able to see such extreme variation even after looping through several worlds. It keeps me entertained just staying here and watching these worlds revolve. Anyway, there's one more fact we can understand from these fragments of worlds. This is the biggest problem we Rika Furudes are facing, and there she goes talking about multiples. The fact that Rika Furude always dies each time. It's as if June 1983 is a dead end for her. Worse, there's no randomness to it. It's guaranteed to happen. In other words, it's the same pattern as the deaths of Jiro Toмотake and Mio Takano. It's following the exact same rule, Rule Y. Toмотake Jiro and Takano Mio are always murdered on the night of Watanagashi. Furude Rika's date of death is not always the same, but she's always dead by the middle of June. Jiro Toмотake and Mio Takano are probably attacked on their way home, so that's why it always happens on the same night. But for Rika Furude, it's different. She takes different actions in every world, and her lifestyle is very unpredictable. For that reason, the day of her death is not always the same. However, she always dies in June, because a similar powerful conviction vows to kill her too. So can we assume that the same Rule Y killing them is also the rule behind her death? Is it the same person killing all 3 of them? I don't know if it's the same person, but it's highly likely the same rule is at work. Is it the same person or the same organization? Is it the same views? Same goals? Rika's most important goal is to escape her deadly fate. But it doesn't mean she just wants to leave the village and survive. She wants to live happily in the village. All of her friends must also be happy too. That's Rika's happy future. the ideal future she hopes for. It's tragic that we can't realize such a simple desire no matter how many times we repeat this. Though it's a tragedy we're only able to perceive because we're being capable of comparing the fragments from different worlds. By the way, I have some interesting information. While Rika is almost always killed by Rule Y, have you noticed that she's killed by Rule X in some worlds? Right. It happened in the Watanagashi and Miyakashi chapters. Rika Furude committed suicide, but you can say she was more or less killed by Rule X via Shion Sonozaki in those worlds, so believing that she's part of the Sonozaki conspiracy, I guess. I've already forgotten what the rules are. In other words, this is a blunder for Rule Y. Rule Y is trying to kill Rika with a strong desire to achieve some aim. But she was killed before that as a result of the unrelated Rule X. Or is that... oh crap, is Rule X the thing about, like, there's always someone who... or almost always someone who's driven to violence. That might have caused them to show some disturbance. This is bad. She's already explaining the rules to me and I've forgotten what each rule is. If Rule Y's objective is simply to bury Rika, then that's not the problem. But if they have some objective beyond that, then that might show up as some other phenomenon. Maybe I should have written the rules down. Perhaps the Watanagashi and Miyakashi chapters have something in common. Something that doesn't happen in the other worlds. Unfortunately, we're Rika Furude, so we don't know what happens after Rika is dead. Or, by any chance, do you know what happened? Since I'm Rika Furude, I only know of events during Rika's life. You, on the other hand, are a special extension who was born in a superior world. Is there anything that didn't happen in the Watanagashi and Miyakashi chapters that happened in all the other worlds after Rika's death? If you know anything, then that must be another truth behind Rule Y. So she's never alive when the Great Hinamizawa disaster happens, right? Like, I think it's always implied that she's dead before that. The memories I have here are all mainly about the chaos brought about by Rika's friends, that is, Rule X. But its foundation, Rule Z, and the obvious hostility common among all worlds, Rule Y, are what I believe to be the true rules governing the stage. If so, then Rika's path is a thorny one. She needs to fight Rule Y in order to survive. Unless she defeats it, she has no future past June 1983. And to win her own happiness, she must also beat Rule X to win her friend's safety. So long as that's undefeated, one of Rika's precious friends may be led to tragedy. If that happens, then even should Rika survive, she wouldn't have the happy future she hopes for. She also may be able to defeat Rule Z, just as Sonozaki Shion faced it in Miyakashi. So long as Rule Z remains, then even if she escapes 1983, it's possible another tragedy may lie waiting in 1984. It's extremely likely that Rule Z is the breeding ground for Rule X. Hinamizawa's fundamental belief that the Sonozaki family is behind everything, and the custom that anything can be misconstrued as the curse, may indirectly be the root of all evil here. People are not surprised to see somebody die on the night of Watanagashi. That type of thinking is keeping the curse alive in Hinamizawa, where it causes even more tragedy. It's Rule Z reinforcing itself. Rules X, Y, and Z. There are 3 rules that hunt Rika down in the eternal June of 1983. They are all tough obstacles. We didn't even figure out these three common rules until recently. Were you aware of them? If you were, I'll give you straight A's. I've tried so hard in the past to break these rules, but I was never successful. However, a miracle happened in the Higurashi chapter. Keiichi Maibara was able to recognize a small fragment from another world by chance, and he beat Rule X. In the end, Rika was still killed that night by Rule Y, though. But still, one rule was defeated. That was a huge leap forward. Rika knew that there were 3 common rules among the worlds, but she could never break any of them. Eventually, she gave up and lost interest in the worlds. That's how I was born. However, she's different now. She learned something valuable from Keiichi Maibara. That the rules can be broken with a strong enough will to fight. If she can break all 3 rules, Rika Furude will be freed from her eternal prison. She doesn't have much time left, though. Rika has traveled through many worlds. Her physical lifespan is not a problem, but her mental lifespan is getting shorter. Mentally, she's extremely old, and her soul is starting to turn into something different. Oh, and then that's like that kind of serious Rika that takes over and says that she's, however, she's centuries older. maybe not centuries, but when she was talking to Rena and she's like, talks about how old she is. In the end, she'll probably lose the ability to experience singular worlds. She's already showing those signs, and eventually her memories from the parallel worlds will mix together, ultimately causing her derangement and the loss of Rika Furude's soul. Then she will disappear. That means that you and I are going to be left in this dark world. The fragments of our memories will gradually disappear, and we will be left alone in the eternal darkness. Eventually, we will die. Rika Furude is aware of that. She knows her mental lifespan is getting shorter and shorter. Hanyuu is also losing her powers. She can't rewind through the years of time like she used to. Hanyuu! That name's been mentioned a couple of times, I think. I wonder if that's whoever this girl is. This girl that is the icon of this chapter. So she's the one that allows Rika to go back in time, and she's probably the one that Rika talks to during the, like, all the tips. Her power has decreased so much that she can barely rewind 1 month of time. Actually, she can only rewind a few weeks. In the next world, she should only have about 2 weeks of time. Rika Furude is going to try and break all 3 rules in just those 2 weeks. Alright, I wanted to know what's outside the well, so I tried to climb my way up from there. I wanted to know what's outside the well, so I continued to climb even when I fell and injured myself. I finally realized the higher I climb, the more pain I feel when I fall. When my curiosity towards the world and my physical pain become equal, I finally understood the meaning of the frog in the well. So I'm wondering if the last chapter, maybe this chapter or the next chapter, is going to be the one where she beats it. Because it seems like, you know, obviously this thing has an end, it has a last chapter, so it must be the one where she finally wins. I hope. I hope this ends in some sort of, like, you know, we have some hope and it's not like the last chapter is be like, ah, she failed and that's it. Goodbye. I felt no gravity in the darkness and lost all my senses as a result. I banged my head on the floor with a dull thud. Man, I hope this whole chapter is not just going to be me reading. My goodness, my mouth is already dry. Seeing stars behind my eyelids, I curled into a ball while holding my head in pain. Yeah. Good. I had no idea why I was in this situation, but as soon as I heard their voices from the top of the cliff, I realized I must have fallen. I remember. I was playing behind the shrine with the rest of the club members. I got too excited and started doing something very dangerous. Then the tree branch broke. That's how I fell off the cliff. My body started to ache all over. I remembered how I fell, but I still felt strange for some reason. I couldn't remember what I was doing. No, it was more that I couldn't remember who Rika Furude was before I fell off the cliff. Ooh, so Rika's turning into maybe this girl. Oh, I heard Hanyuu's panicked voice. Oh, I looked behind me and saw Hanyuu standing there with a scared look on her face.
Hanyuu.
I'm so...
これは一体何事なの? リカはみんなと遊んでて崖から転げ落ちたのです。大丈夫なのですか? 羽生、そんなことはどうでもいいわ。今日はいつ? 昭和何年の何月何日?
I always ask this question first when something like this happens. She finally realized I was asking the same old question.
昭和58年、渡流しのお祭りが来週なのですから、なんてこと。それしか猶予がないってわけ。僕たちの力も、これが精一杯なのです。
Hanyuu muttered regretfully. It was the middle of June 1983, so was Rika waking up, like, on the ground? Was that her being transported back in time? Because she said that she can only be transported back a short amount of time now? This is going to be a very confusing chapter for me, I feel like, because now we're introducing this new character with time travel potential, so... If this really was the best she could do, I had no choice. I couldn't complain. I gradually started to remember more things.
私がまた昭和58年の6月にいるということは、また私は殺されたのか。
After Rena surrendered to the police... Oh, here we go. They're going to get into what happened at the end of the last chapter. After Rena surrendered to the police, all the classmates were given checkups at the clinic. I didn't get hurt, so I was sent back home after they determined I had no injuries. Oh, and we get to find out what happened to Rika before. My memories started getting vague from that point on. A common characteristic of my violent deaths. When my life is taken violently, the memory before death becomes vague with static. It's like a violently ripped roll of toilet paper. That example should make it easy to understand, even if it's uncouth. That's why I have no clear memory of what happened and how I died that night. I only have vague memories. I think someone covered my mouth with a handkerchief or something and I passed out. That's about the only thing that I can remember, and only vaguely. I'm not even sure if it really happened. The only thing I know for sure is I was attacked on my way home, or possibly after I got there, and that I was murdered suddenly. I don't know who killed me or how I was killed. I'm glad at least I don't remember the horrific ending to my life every time it happens. Because of my experiences, I think I now understand why ghosts wander around this world, not knowing that they died so suddenly. If it's a death from a long-lasting illness, people tend to remember that they were sick. They can kind of assume that they died after being sick for a long time. But when your memory is violently disrupted like mine, it can get quite confusing. When I first experienced this, I wasn't even sure if I was dreaming or not. I even thought that I hit my head hard and lost my memory. I needed to organize things before I get too confused. My name is Rika Ferde. People look at me in a special way, but that's not a big deal for me. All I want is a happy life where I can play around with my best friends. I can't remember how long I've been living just for the sake of obtaining that simple happiness. Oh, and yeah, she's like kind of faded a little bit. She's definitely, so she's not a real person, or at least not in this world. This panicked girl here is named Hanyuu. I'm the only one who can see her. Perhaps she only exists inside of my head. At any rate, Hanyuu's invisible and can generally only interact with me. It'll be a long story if I try to explain Hanyuu's existence, so I won't be doing that right now. Besides, I don't even know how I should talk about her. She's been there since I was born, and her existence is a natural thing for me. And there's a thing about the sister, right? About like, so maybe Hanyuu, maybe she died before she was born, and now she's kind of tethered to Rika? I don't know. I saw everyone running up the gravel road towards me. They're my important and lovable best friends. Our group's active, boisterous, and we get serious about doing stupid things. I'm never bored when I'm around them, and I love them very much.
Rika-chan, 大丈夫? 捻挫とかしてない? どこ打ったの? おじさんに見せてみて.
So I wonder if Rika puts on this act because she sounds so old and wise when she's talking to Hanyuu. But I wonder if she puts on this act because it's like she talks about how old she is because she keeps going back in time and experiencing things. So maybe she puts on this voice just so she doesn't freak people out, being like this little girl with just like this old woman voice.
ありがとうなのです。頭に単行部ができただけなのですよ。
I think all I got was a bump at least. My injury wasn't as serious as everyone thought.
頭を打った時はその場では大丈夫でも油断がなりませんでしたよ。
それもそうだな。念には念で監督に診察してもらった方がいいかもしれないな。
レナもそれがいいと思うな。どうしよう、監督を呼んでくる？そうだね。近くの家で電話を借りて監督を呼んでみるよ。そこまでしなくても大丈夫なのですよ。この通りピンピンしてますのです。ニパー。ダメですわよ、リカ。万が一ということがありましたよ。
Sadako warned me with a stern voice. It really wasn't a big deal, but I decided to nod since Sadako was trying to be generous. She wasn't trying to boss me around or anything. She was only saying that because of how much she cares. I've seen it before in the many different lives that I've been through. I have no doubt she's really concerned about me. It's not just Sadako. Mion, Rena, and Keiichi are the same. They're all so nice to me and they truly do care. Mion left to look for a phone. Rena also left with a towel looking for the water tap. Sadako remained nearby, taking care of me with a worried face. And Hanyuu was just standing there, still wearing a panicked look. Keiichi seemed to be panicked too, but he was trying not to show it. He was standing by me wearing a calm expression.
大丈夫か？
大丈夫なのですよ。もう全然痛くないのです。
なら不幸中の幸いだったよな。よかったよかった。
I wouldn't feel anything special about his words if this was a while ago. But at that moment when Rena took over the classroom, when she hurt Mion, Keiichi tried his best to save Rena, even so. He was more reliable than I ever imagined from his normal behavior. He's usually an insensitive guy who hurts other people's feelings without noticing, but that's not his true self. He has a secret side. He's willing to sacrifice himself for other people. I was just observing that not too long ago. That's why I can honestly feel his generosity now. Now that I think about it, Keiichi regained a memory from another world the previous time around. Is it possible he carries that memory in this world too? If that's the case, I have some hope. Hanyuu and I are totally powerless. Hanyuu is only like heir to everyone but me, and I'm just a little girl. There's only so much we can do ourselves. But Keiichi is different. He changed the fate that I once resigned myself to. He's somebody who may have the power to take me to my unseen future. If I can get Keiichi to understand me, he could be my hero. Perhaps I'm actually not expecting that much of him. I just want someone to understand my struggle of being stuck in this maze.
Keiichi?
I spoke to him slowly. It had been a while since I felt so nervous. I hadn't felt this way since I started my endless life in 1983. As a witch, I normally would know what his response would be before even talking to him. Oh, she's just straight up calling herself a witch? I often remained silent because I already know how pitiful the reply would be. But in that case, why was I so nervous now?
呼んだか、リカちゃん。
Hanyuu gave me a disappointed look before I responded to Keiichi.
Rika.
I could tell what Hanyuu was thinking too. The miracle wasn't going to happen. If miracles do happen, one could have happened many times in my other lives. But I've only seen one miracle before. The miracle that Keiichi gave me was a once-in-a-lifetime kind of miracle. Only if it happened again would it be a true miracle. I won't get out of this world just because I rolled 6 on the die once. I can't get out unless I get a miracle that's equivalent to getting 6 on the die 10 times in a row. And so, I rolled 10 dice wishing that they'd all turn out to be 6.
Keiichi?
どうしたんだよ。どこか痛むのか？
He looked at me worriedly after I called his name twice.
ケイイチは覚えていますですか？
I knew how sudden my question was. As I thought he would, he looked at me with a confused face.
え？覚えてるって何の話だよ。
I looked inside his eyes to see his true feelings. He should remember, he should know. Even though he doesn't have the memory, Keiichi experienced it.
なんですのケイイチさん。何かリカに悪いことでもしたんじゃありませんの？自分の胸によく聞いてごらんなさいですわよ。ケイイチ、学校の屋根の上に登ったことを覚えていますですか？学校の屋根？ケイイチさん、そんなとこに登ったんですの？さとこは黙っててなのです。ケイイチ、覚えていませんで。
俺が？屋根の上に？いつ？いや、リカちゃん、それは多分他の誰かの勘違いだろ。俺屋根なんか登ったことないし、登り方だって知らないよ。
Of course you haven't experienced it in this world yet. But please tell me you remember. I know you've never been up on the roof, but you should still remember doing it. You shouldn't be able to remember it true, but you actually did once. You should be able to remember it once again.
屋根の上にボールでも取りに行ったんじゃありませんの？
いや、そんな経験一度もねえよ。さとこは経験あるか？
まさか。屋根の上なんて上がったら先生に怒られましたよ。
でもさ、屋根の上で昼寝とかしたら気分が良さそうだよな。
覚えてるわけないのですよ。
Gah.
そんな簡単に奇跡が起こるなら 僕もリカもこんな苦労はしないのですよ。
Shut up. I really want them to go into who is Hanyuu exactly? Like, who is this person, this entity that just appeared? I know she didn't just appear. Like, she's been with Rika the whole time. You know, in the tips, you could hear the hints of it, but I'm like, what is her deal? I knew that. I knew that he wouldn't remember.
どうせまた僕たちはお祭りの終わりとともに消えてゆく夏のセミの運命なのです。うるさいな。
As I stared at her fiercely, Hanyuu realized she had crossed a line. This might be a waste of time. The maze we're in might not have an exit. It might be an endless loop without a goal in place. We are trapped in this fate. I thought that Keiichi might be able to get me out of here, but that Keiichi I saw was truly a miracle, a momentary glimmer. The Keiichi of this world doesn't bear that same miracle. All the same, I'm not going to give up. Last time, too, I gave up on fighting destiny. I realized Rena was beyond salvation, so I bid her farewell and forsook that world. But Keiichi fought and broke the cycle of fate. I should have worked harder with that Keiichi in that world. I could have broken this endless cycle together with him. Am I going to repeat this life, waiting for that miracle to happen again? I can't do that. I don't want to repeat the same life anymore. I'm tired of it. I'm tired of this world, my fate, and everything. I'm tired of getting murdered by destiny. Keiichi showed me a miracle. I should be able to do the same too. I must fight. I must fight with all my remaining power. I was always fighting. I was fighting when I had more power. But I never made it. How can I expect to win this time? It's pretty sad. It just shows you that all of these characters have something that they're harboring, you know, deep inside, like Rena with her mother and father's divorce, Sadako with her uncle and aunts, you know, Keiichi with his past, and Rika knowing that she's gonna die over and over and over again. And yet they seem so normal on the outside. Still, I must fight. Keiichi taught me that fate can be shattered. I'm going to fight one more time. This is interesting. To my granddaughter. I'm sorry for leaving you like this. I just need you to understand I'd rather take my own life than be fearful of how many days I have left to live. That's why I'm writing this letter to you. I can't stand the fear of being unable to leave behind a will while my life is prolonged, even as I lose my consciousness. In the end, there's nothing I can leave behind for you. I was unable to leave any of my achievements to this world. I was forgotten before I was dead. I leave this world a humiliated man, knowing that I had no appreciation from anyone. You must do better than me. You must achieve something that your grandfather was never able to achieve. I don't mind what field you choose. You must leave your mark on this world. You must leave behind your achievements. You will eventually die someday. You will eventually turn to ashes. As a human being, that's your inevitable fate. But if you achieve a great success, you will live forever even after you depart. Those who live beyond their deaths are called gods. I wished to become one, but I was unable to do so. So in my place, you must become a god someday. Okay. I'm assuming that's towards Rika? I know her father and mother died in the quote-unquote curse. And there's all this talk about Rika being the, like, reincarnation of Oyashiro, or, like, you know, a mascot for him, but maybe that's Hanyuu. I don't know. I've been told that there's going to be a lot of things answered in this chapter, which makes me feel good. I hope. I hope the answers I get are ones that I will like. We'll see. Hey, haven't seen Eri in a while.
もう結構ですよ。
Eri withdrew the needle from Sadako's arm. It must not have hurt much for the needle to be pulled out. Sadako kept her eyes closed in fear, thinking the needle was still inside her arm.
さとこ、お注射はもう終わったのですよ。
Oh, and oh my gosh, she's actually dressed as a nurse. I don't know if this is my first time seeing Takano in a nurse's outfit.
あら、もう終わってたんですの。
As Sadako opened her eyes, she found that Eri was no longer sitting in front of her. Takano was wiping her arm with rubbing alcohol instead.
そうよ。もう終わってたのよ。入江先生は私よりお注射が上手だから。終わったことにも気づかなかったでしょ。傷口を揉んじゃダメよ。できれば重いものも持たないこと。
ええ、分かっていましたよ。さとこは偉いのですよ。なでなでしてあげますのです。注射くらいもう全然平気ですのよ。リカに撫でられるような覚えはございませんですわ。
Not long ago, she would go into a panic when it was time for her to get her shot. The way she behaved today is in itself worthy of praise. Everyone in the room smiled, aware of that growth. Oh, that's Sadako trying to be more independent, be braver.
じゃあ、さとこちゃんはいつもの検査を受けてください。高野さん、お願いします。
ええ。さあ、さとこちゃん。いつものクイズをしましょうね。
高野さんのクイズは答えにくい問題が多くて私苦手ですわね。
いつもと同じよ。答えづらい問題はわからないと言ってくれればいいわ。変に考え込まず、自然に思いついた答えを口にしてくれればいいのよ。
Takano smiled at Sadako to ease her tension. It's weird to see her actually acting like a nurse. Then she led Sadako to a desk in the back of the examination room.
さとこの具合、良いといいのです。
I'm wondering about this. They're saying her usual tests like this is something that happens normally. Sadako okay? I don't know if it's because of the heat, but Sadako has been showing negative symptoms since last month. The change of the seasons can affect her physically and emotionally. It's not a surprise that this is happening to her.
私は入江たちのところへでも行って、羽生はどうする？僕はさとこのそばにいてあげますのです。ありがとう。そうしてあげて。
Hanyuu went over to where Sadako was. Fortunately, I'm the only one who can see Hanyuu. She won't be a distraction if she goes and observes Sadako's test. I, of course, would be a distraction like that. This is supposed to be a routine exam, but it seems like Takano is teasing her by giving her difficult questions. It would be pretty funny to observe how Sadako reacts to them. I'm a little jealous that Hanyuu gets to watch everything without being a bother to Sadako. Hee hee. Eri was talking with two other staff members about Sadako's exam results. I walked up and joined them.
よかった。では、解放に向かっていますか。
From what Eri was saying, her results must have turned out well.
入江、どうなのですか？
安心してください。いい結果が出ました。では、あとよろしくお願いします。
After ordering his staff to continue their work, Eri showed me some difficult paperwork and started explaining it to me.
先週の検査結果に少々焦りすぎたようです。急に気候が変わったので、交感神経が過敏に反応したのでしょう。風邪をひきかけたりということはありませんでしたか？
There was one night recently that was fairly hot. Sadako was sleeping without her blanket and her stomach was exposed. She might have caught a cold that night.
お腹を出して寝てたことがありましたです。おへそをつっついたけど起きなかったのです。
それは羨ましい。ぜひ今度そういうことがあったら
Eri,
呼んでください。
you couldn't just not be weird for like one interaction.
私もさとこちゃんのおへそをプニプニして
Yeah,
みたいも
don't
の
be
です。
talking to Eri about Sadako's exposed belly. Of course he was gonna say something. God damn it, dude.
プニプニなのですよ。お腹もぽよぽよなのです。可愛いからお布団をかけるのがもったいないのですよ。
それが寝冷えの真相ですか。
リーカー、聞こえていましたよ。そういう時はこっそりお布団をかけてくださいませ。
ダメよ、さとこちゃん。検査中よ。時間も計ってるんだから、こっちに集中して。
Eri, Hanyuu, and I all laughed. Sadako went back to her test with a bitter look on her face. Erie began speaking to me in a softer voice.
ただ小康状態には戻りましたが、レベルはレベル3マイナス。昨日も今日も明日も
Whoa.
危険な状態を脱していないことに変わりはありません。
レベル3は永遠に治らないのですか？
Oh, okay.
アナフィラキシーショックと同じで、仮に異物が完全に取り除かれても人体側に過剰な反応を示す体質が作られてしまいます。つまり
聡子は完治しても一生レベル3から治ら。
そういうことになります。
Can you explain it more, please? I don't understand all that medical jargon.
ですが悲観することはありません。
It's not the end of the world. Not yet, anyway.
規則正しい生活習慣とセルフコントロール、そしてある種の投薬を続けることによって症状の発生を抑えることができます。
一生治らない。
I looked over at Sadako as she enjoyed taking her test. She seemed to be having fun even while being teased by Takano. I can't believe she's suffering from an incurable disease. Man, poor
言葉
Sadako.
を悪く言えばそうなります。
Girl, like, as if she didn't have it bad enough.
ですが世の中には難病ではあってもうまく病気と付き合っていけるケースも少なくありません。例えば糖尿病がそうでしょう。病気そのものは生涯治りませんが、その発症は抑えることができます。
I know that very well. There are many worse diseases in the world. Sadako might be in a relatively good situation compared to many other sick people.
もちろんこれで妥協するつもりはありません。聡子ちゃんはきっと完治させます。絶対にです。
信じてますですよ。
ええ、信じてください。
Erie spoke to me with a serious look on his face. As Sadako's best friend, I felt relieved to hear his words. I'm sure he'll do his best to save Sadako's life. I have no doubt he'll do so. I've seen him act like this in every life I've lived. That's sweet of Rika, like she's concerned about Sadako's life, knowing that her own life is basically going to end almost every time in the same way. I also know why he's so passionate to save her, but I'm not supposed to know about it in this life. Oh! Okay, so is this does this have to do with the uncle, or is this something else? Like, yeah, because Erie really does seem to be especially soft with Sadako, so I'm like, what's the reason? Like, he knows about Sadako's family situation, but I wonder if there's more to it. That's why I always pretend not to see his sad smile.
そうだ、リカさん。月末にまた少し大掛かりな検査があります。
今度は僕がモルモットになる番なのですか？
そんなつもりは。医学に貢献していただいていますし、大勢の人を救うことにもなります。
Erie's guinea pig is not just Sadako. I'm also one of them. Although guinea pig is probably not the right term. Without Erie's efforts, Sadako would not be here today. For that reason, I should be showing respect to this man. I smiled at him since my choice of words had hurt his feelings.
僕を調べて聡子の治療に役立つのなら僕がモルモットでもいい。
ご協力を
Damn
感
it.
謝します。
Sorry guys, I keep skipping. I'm sorry.
もう少し人と設備とお金があればこれだけの負担をかけないのですが。
The next moment, the phone rang. Erie answered it in his usual business-like tone.
はい、もしもし。
東京から外線です。そちらへ回します。
I could hear the voice from the phone.
ああ、リサさんですね。もう今年もそんな時期になりましたか。
Risa.
電話は所長室で取りますから、そっちへ回してください。
Risa, who is that? That's the woman that was with working with Sadako's uncle, right? Risa? Absolutely. Please hang up on this line in that case. I feel that was just the last episode and I'm already forgetting names. I'm terrible.
わかりました。リカさん、すみません。東京からの電話です。
いってらっしゃいなのですよ。
As soon as Eri hung up the phone in the other room started ringing. He left the examination room and headed towards the office. Hanyuu returned to my side as soon as Eri left. Hanyuu doesn't like to be around me when I'm talking with Eri. I don't think she dislikes him. It's just that she doesn't really want to hear what he has to say. Eri doesn't mean any harm, but Hanyuu is often hurt by the things that come out of his mouth.
どう？さとこの様子は？さとこは相変わらず間違い探しは下手くそなのです。僕の方がいっぱい見つけられましたのですよ。あんたの検査結果なんてどうでもいいでしょ。さとこの結果はどうなの？
I thought she was there to check on Sadako, but she was taking the quiz alongside her instead. That's so typical of Hanyuu. She was treating it almost like a game, but Sadako was tired after taking the same quiz every week. She seemed sleepy, especially after waking up so early this morning. The quiz in this case wasn't about a right or wrong answer. It was about timing and minutes, how long it took her to answer the question, and observing how she acted during the quiz. Not all the questions would be simple ones, so Sadako often got headaches, more so than even the spelling tests we take at school.
もうほとんど終わりなの？はいです。今、高野が持っているのが最後の一冊なのですよ。
Takano was showing a book to Sadako with abstract pictures inside. I couldn't even tell if it was supposed to be a picture. It was just a symmetrical ink stain.
さあ、これで最後よ。これは何に見えるかしら？
Both Hanyuu and I looked at the picture over Sadako's shoulders. Even I didn't know what to answer when looking at that strange ink stain. Sadako continued to think. Takano observed her taking notes while Sadako struggled. She was also timing how long it took her to answer, holding a stopwatch under the table. I spoke to Hanyuu so only she could hear me.
羽生は何に見える？このシミ。ソフトクリームなのです。すべて落としてしまって地面にべっしゃりとなのです。もったいない。なるほど。実に相手の考えがわかるテストね。
To me, it looked like a horse mackerel that had been cut open and its guts pulled out. I was thinking of food too, just in a more, violent way. It was rather shocking to learn my thought processes are the same as Hanyuu's.
何に見えるかしら？
I feel like that's something a lot of people would probably... It's like, I feel like food is something that's on a lot of people's minds, so I feel like a lot of people would think of food when they see, like, a Rorschach test.
思いつきでいいのよ。
Or anything abstract. I mean, I certainly would, but it might just be because I'm hungry right now. Sadako must not be very good at this test. She always takes a long time to answer questions like this. She finally opened her mouth to speak.
2匹の蝶々が重なっている感じですわね。
2匹の蝶々が重なって。いいわよ。続けて。どうして蝶々は重なっているのかしら？
Takano continued to take notes as Sadako spoke. Curious about what she was writing, I looked, but... Is that German? I can't read it all. Takano was so mean.
ずっと離れ離れで会えなかった蝶々が、やっと一緒になれて喜んでるところ、ごめんなさいですわね。私も何を言ってるのか自分でよくわかりませんわね。
いえ、そういう答え方でいいのよ。思いついたことが抽象的なら、そのまま口にしてくれればいいの。そういう検査なんだから。
本当にこんなへんてこな絵の感想を言うだけで検査になりますの？
なるわよ。例えば今のこの絵だけど、去年のさとこちゃんは別な答えを出してるの。それを比べるだけでも、この1年のあなたの変化を測ることができるわよ。
なんだか嫌なテストですわね。去年の私はこの絵に何で答えたのでございますの？
Takano smiled and took a note without answering her question. I tried to remember what her answer was, but I have more than 100 years worth of memories in my head. Hanyuu might remember better than I do. As I looked at Hanyuu, I realized she was standing there with a sad expression. I decided not to ask her. I could tell what kind of answer Sadako gave back then just by looking at Hanyuu's face. Oh, because that would have been the year that all that stuff happened, right? Her brother disappeared and the aunt got murdered. So yeah, it was a pretty traumatic year for her. So I can imagine it probably wasn't a very happy answer. Last year, June 1982, that's when Sadako was being abused by her cruel aunt. Recalling that, I didn't even want to know what Sadako answered. But just a year later, the Sadako who was so worn down could no longer be seen. She became so strong. I know how difficult it was for her to stay tough and strong like this. Her growth over the past year is overwhelming to me.
ケンさん、終わりましたか?
Eri returned from his office.
ええ、終わりましたわ。
だいぶさとこちゃんも手際が良くなりましたわ。今日はだいぶ早く終わりましたのよ。
早く終わらせるように頑張ったんですもの。今日は用事がある日だからのんびりとはできませんのよ。
おや？今日は何かあるんですか？日曜日ではありませんでしたっけ？
今日はみんなでミーのおじさんのおもちゃ屋さんで部活があるのですよ。
なるほど。さとこちゃんが妙に今日はおとなしく検査に従ってくださると思いました。予定が詰まっていたんですね。それは悪いことをしました。ではさとこちゃん、これはいつものです。
Eri put a big paper bag on the table. He opened it up and gave her instructions about the medications. Sadako had heard the same instructions over and over before, but Eri still continued to talk just the same.
状態がいいようですので、お注射はこれまでの日に2回に戻します。
I wonder if there was any reference to Sadako having to take medications in any of the other chapters.
昼食前と
Or
就寝
being,
前の
or
2
like
回に
having some sort of
必ず
illness.
注射をしてください。注射針は必ず変えるように。同じ針を2度使ってはいけませんよ。それからこちらはどうしても体調が悪くなった時のみ食後に。
はいはいはい、いつもと同じですわよ。分かっていましたよ。
Sadako couldn't wait to meet our friends for the club activity. It made me feel happy to see her as excited as this.
注射2本に戻りましたのですよ。よかったのです。
The number of shots she has to take each day represents how well she's doing. So it's a good thing she has to take fewer shots.
大変よね。1日に2本も注射を打つのは。
Hanyuu grew quiet after hearing my comment. Eri handed her the paper bag after he finished his instructions.
リカ、終わりましたよ。
ええ、お疲れ様。検査中からずっとそわそわしてたからね。いってらっしゃいな。
すみませんわね、上の空で。いつも検査をしてくださって感謝していますのよ。
ほら、もう時間がないんじゃないの？私の車で送ろうかしら。そうそう。また車に新しいぬいぐるみがあるのよ。今度は約束通り、さとこちゃんが名前をつけてくれていいわよ。
It is weird seeing Takano seem so, I don't know, just so different as a nurse.
あら、何のぬいぐるみでございますかしら。どんな名前にしようか迷いますわね。何の動物のぬいぐるみなんですの？
また猫なのよ。今度は虎島なの。可愛いからきっと気に入ってくれるわよ。
Oh, and then she gets her stuffed animals all the time. That's really sweet. Sadako and Takano are good friends. I had no idea. Eri and Takano really seem to like Sadako. I guess because they see Sadako a lot because she's sick, which I also had no idea about. Like, this is the 7th chapter and I'm learning more new things about these characters. They're both fond of stuffed animals. Every time Takano gets a new one, she brags about it to Sadako. That's all they have in common, but having a friend like Takano is a special thing for Sadako. She's part of the Hojo family who tried to betray the village. People at the clinic are the only adults who will even talk to Sadako.
じゃあお二人とも部活行って。罰ゲームが未定でしたら、ぜひメイド服の着用を提案してくださいね。
Eri, keep your mouth shut.
サイズから種類までいろいろと取り揃えておりますので。また来週お会いしましょう。
やなこったなのですよ。また来週なのです。さ、行きましょうですわ。今日は部活メンバーだけじゃありませんものね。腕が鳴りましたよ。
I bowed slightly and made to leave the examination room, but I soon realized something. Eri was looking at me with a sad expression on his face. Just with that look, I could tell what he wanted to say. Please take care of Sadako-chan if something happens to her. I nodded at him and stepped out into the hallway with Sadako.
やれやれ。検査は慣れても疲れますわね。検査、お嫌なのですか？めんどくさいから嫌ではありますけど、これも仕事ですもの。仕方ありませんわ。
Sadako is supporting Eri's research. She gets financial support by helping him out. Or at least that's what Sadako thinks she's doing. Sadako was bursting with enthusiasm, so we headed to Okonomiya at full speed. We wound up waiting for Keiichi and the other club members for a long time. We got here early, but they were late. I think they were late the last time we did this too. Did it mean that this was something that was meant to happen? It's unpleasant that I can't even change the most minor of fates. I finally saw them coming towards us on their bikes.
皆様方、お待ちしてましたよ。
Sadako acted like she was upset, but I could tell she was pleased to see them just the same.
さとこが可愛いのですよ。そこが飽きないのよ。可愛すぎる。
Sadako's behavior soothes my feelings of frustration. This is why I love Sadako. If she was a small fluffy animal, I would definitely keep her in a cage.
さとこちゃん、リカちゃん、おはようございますなのです。
おはようリカちゃん。さとこ、警察が来る前にケリをつけるぞ。目標は10億強奪だ。
圭一さんの話がわかりませんわ。遅くなったかな。リカちゃんたちは今来たの？今日は早く終わったのでだいぶ待ってましたですよ。
Mion and Rena knew that Sadako gets a checkup every Sunday at the clinic.
そりゃあ悪いことしたわ。こっちはケイちゃんがなかなか来なくてさ。
That Keiichi. So he's the reason they're always late.
圭一では仕方ありませんですよ。ニパー。
ちょい待て。俺が悪役になれば丸く収まるのかよ。
もちろん圭一さんでなくては務まらない大役でしたよ。
実に嫌な大役だな。
Oh, that cracks me up thinking about like all the past things. I was like, well, Mion not so much. That was mostly Shion who was kind of the villain. Keiichi was definitely a villain, and I'm saying villain like they're not really villains. They had their reason for doing things, but for the things that they did, I guess you could call them kind of villains. So it's like Keiichi definitely, Rena, Mion sorta kinda, not really, Sadako no, and Rika no. They're all sweet angels. But it's like this why they're calling Keiichi the villain when he is the one who is like sticks his neck out the most, I feel like, for them. You know, he's willing to put his life on the line in almost every one of these scenarios, these timelines, to save people. Show the boy some respect.
こんなので丸く収まると思ったら大間違いだぞ。
Keiichi and Sadako messed around with each other. Sadako acted like she was crying, and Rena punched Keiichi, knocking him out cold. It was the same old situation they always got into. I can watch this sort of thing forever. It's like having a glass of cold milk after taking a hot bath.
やっぱりこれが正しい丸い収め方。
前歯が欠ける前に新しいオチを探した方がいいと思うけどね。
Especially after the last chapter, we really know what Rena's capable of. We all laughed at him and finished greeting each other.
今日もみんなとっても元気なのです。元気に勝る宝はないわね。そんなこと言ってるとリカはどんどん老け込んじゃいますのです。うるさいな。誰のせいだと思ってんのよ。
She's so mean to Hanyuu.
当分甘いものを食べるのやめるわよ。
Hanyuu seemed to be getting more depressed than usual. I should stop teasing her so much.
嘘よ。冗談だからあんまりひっつかないで。ごめんなさいなのです。
Hanyuu loves sweet treats. She especially loves cake and ice cream. Since she can't eat anything, she has to depend on me when it comes to that. In other words, whatever I eat, Hanyuu can taste too. Even if Hanyuu craves something, it doesn't mean anything if I don't eat it. In other words, I have total control of what she eats. That's why it's fun to tease her with saying what I'll eat and what I won't. It's almost as fun as teasing Sadako.
はあ、リカちゃんは今日もご機嫌だね。お持ち帰り。
はいはい。お持ち帰ったら犯罪だからね。
ミオ店のおじさんが呼んでるぜ。
リカ、聞きまして。今日の部活、賞金が出るんだそうですのよ。
I remember. Mio was going to be paying 50,000 yen out of her pocket as a prize. Damn. I couldn't believe she could just afford that. Therefore, I have to assume she has some kind of guarantee that she won't lose.
なんと5万円でしたよ。5万円。
That's $500, right? That's quite a bit of money. Sadako stared at me. Oh no. She was expecting me to be surprised to hear the prize was 50,000 yen. It's natural to be surprised after hearing that sum. Wait, is this one that happened? Oh, I'm trying to remember if there was one where the prize was... I feel like this is sort of familiar. And they said it wasn't just the club members. Is this the one where there was like the board game tournament with a bunch of kids? But I didn't react because I already knew it. Perhaps I gave the impression that I've known it for a long time.
ケイチさん、5万円なんてすごい賞金と思いませんですかと？
I was kind of bummed if this is like a repeat of something that's been in another chapter. I always like new club activities.
5万円なんだよそれ。ケイイチ王国の5年分の GNP に匹敵するぞ。
Sadako said the same thing to Keiichi. She probably assumed I wasn't listening to her. So she decided to talk to Keiichi instead. Oh man, this is so crazy. If this is a repeat of one of the chapters, it's just seeing like Rika's, you know, now that we know that Rika's lived all of these timelines, it's just knowing that she knows what's going to happen.
小さなミスよ。大丈夫。5万円もあれば、もうずっと使い切れないくらいのお醤油が買えますです。
And we know Rika and soy sauce. Oh boy.
なんで5万円分もお醤油を買わないといけないんですの。
She's like messing up her timeline. She's like, wait, soy sauce. The big thing of soy sauce. That was when I was attacked by Shion.
お醤油を買ってきてと言っても、めんどくさがる人がいるからなのですよ。ニパー。リカって結構根に持ちますのね。
5万円分の醤油って一体どのくらいだよ。すげえ量になりそうだな。
Keiichi joined the conversation, which finally brought us back to our normal pace. In order to pursue a greater happiness, I need to sacrifice a smaller one. In a perfect world, Rika Furaday was supposed to be surprised to hear from her best friend that the prize was 50,000 yen. But I already knew that. I knew it from my previous lives, so all I could do was give her a boring reaction. I can't be surprised at the big prize of 50,000 yen. Oh, it's so sad too. It's like Rika... it's like, because she knows these things are happening, not only does she have this just kind of overwhelming anxiety about like her fate of dying, but she can't even be surprised about little things in life. It's like, didn't even think about that. It's just, you can't have these genuine reactions to things. I can't give her the reaction she expects from me. I'm losing the ability to be surprised by life. And after the continued repetition of small incidents like this, there will be nothing left that I can find interesting. I'll have nothing to be surprised about. I'll never be impressed with anything. Damn, that is such a sad existence. It's like if you, are immortal and you live for eternity. It's just like you eventually just lose, like, life just kind of is dull because there's like, I don't know, it's something to think about for sure. Eventually I'll lose my emotions entirely. That's why I'm always trying to be careful. I make sure I act like the Rika Furde who doesn't know anything. Even though I may not be impressed, as a young girl, Rika Furde should be impressed with many things. And explains why Rika seems so wise beyond her years, because she is. Rika Furde is supposed to act excited when she encounters something for the first time. I try to, at least. But the more and more I try, the more I feel like Rika Furde is someone very distant. Oh god, just like losing yourself.
ごめん。こういうことで感情を灰色にすると、また寿命が縮んじゃうわね。世界をもっと楽しまなきゃ。
But it's nice that she genuinely feels happiness when she's around her friends, at least. I don't mean my lifespan in literally. I'm not referring to my physical lifespan, but my mental one. The more and more I repeat the same days, the more I lose, from wonder to passion. And eventually my life will become like an overplayed videotape. If I'm tired of that tape, I have a choice to close my eyes and sleep. By the time I wake up, the video should be over. But in reality, my life is not a beat-up old videotape. If I close my eyes and sleep, that would be my death. So fucked up. She's like 10 years old and she's thinking like this. I mean, she's 10 physically, but like mentally, how old is she? When my mental lifespan is over, Rika Furde will turn into a doll who can't even move a finger by her own will. When that happens, my pursuit of happiness will be over. I don't want that to happen. It's been at least 100 years, if not more. I've been stuck in this living hell for so long. I don't want my life to end here.
ごめん。もう大丈夫。100年程度で愚痴ってたら、あんたに笑われちゃうものね。
Okay, so Hanyuu's even older.
僕はもう運命に慣れていますのですから。よし、大丈夫。私はフルでリカ。私はフルでリカ。
If I don't stay focused on being Rika Furde, I'm afraid I may end up showing my true self inside of that shell. Rika Furde is supposed to be a cute and innocent little girl after all.
レナだったら5万円で何を買いますですか?
And just like that, the happy music. It's like she had a moment of like self-reflection and then just the happy music again when she's pretending to be, her happy self.
ランディ君人形とか売ってもらえないのかな。沖宮のチェーン店に5万円持ってったら売ってくれないかな。その5万円で鎖を切る工具と第8車を買った方が早いと思いますです。レナさんだったら素手で鎖を引きちぎりかねませんわね。
I bet that too.
違いない違いない。
ひどい。
Thus, we rejoin the typical flow of conversation naturally. Once I enter that flow, it's not hard for me to continue as Rika Furde. Being Rika Furde is like flying a kite for me. Once it's up in the air, it can stay in the sky for a while. But if something happens and it loses control, it's one heck of a challenge to get it back on track. Every time it tries to get back up in the air, the kite gets dragged on the ground and wears out. I'm exactly like that. Finally, Mion started clapping her hands to get everyone's attention. I already knew the rules. Okay, so this must be the board game tournament. The members will be broken into 5 different groups, and each group plays a game that they choose together. I was secretly hoping Mion would change the rules for some reason. There's nothing more boring than to already know what was going to happen.
ミオンの部活って割と気まぐれなことが多いもの。ひょっとするとルールは違うこともあるかも。普段ならそういうこともあると思いますですが、 今日はきっと何日も前から計画していたことだと思うのです。強い意志は運命になりやすい。だったわね。
Normally, when we're doing club activities, Mio decides what to play at the last minute. She opens her locker and randomly decides what game to play. For that reason, our club activities are rarely repeated throughout my lives. That's why I'm never bored with them. But just as Hanyuu said, today's event was something that Mio had been planning for a while. I was certain she wouldn't suggest anything spontaneously today. In that case, this won't be up to random chance. Mio had only one idea in her mind. Therefore, it was equivalent to destiny. Although her idea of having this event in the toy store is actually a spontaneous one. In all the lives I've repeated, there's a very low chance for this event to occur.
だから、あまりそういうのは期待しない方がいいのです。期待してるわけじゃないわ。
Of course, I was lying just now. I was hoping Mion would suggest a new rule for this game. If it was the same rules again, I'd be suffering for a few minutes while I listened to her instructions. Nothing is more frustrating than walking the same path over and over again. Please, Mion, please change my fate. Please.
まずはくじ引きで5つの卓に分かれるよ。そして各卓から1人の勝者を出して。
Yeah, it's the same one. It was the same rules after all.
ごめん。ちょっと期待した。変な期待は、かえって理科を傷つけますですよ。そうね。何度も教えられてるのに。私も学ばないわね。
Hanyuu had taught me so many times. She taught me the trick to swimming in the flow of destiny. The flow of destiny is just like a river's. By going with the flow, I can swim the direction I want to some extent, but of course trying to swim against the flow requires great effort. Allowing myself to drift causes the least amount of strain. Of course, some strong currents are impossible to resist, even with great effort. If I recklessly try to resist without realizing it's impossible, then I'll only wear myself out needlessly, just as if fighting a river's current. So Hanyuu taught me to read those currents. Which is why I should have easily imagined that the rules would be the same the moment I learned Mion had already planned today's event in advance. Yet I still wish the rules would be different, a completely wasteful action. In the end, my hopes were betrayed, only leaving my heart worn out. And things like that caused me to separate further from Rika Furaday. Eventually, I'll grow tired of everything, lose all interest, and die. It's called being an adult. Sorry, that got dark.
抗えない運命は受け入れる。理科なら、運命の流れを読むことができますですよ。そうよね。ただでさえ短い残りの寿命。大事にしないとね。
I sighed and pretended as though I was listening to what Mion was explaining.
どうしたんだ、リカちゃん。退屈なのか？
Keiichi surprised me all of a sudden.
退屈って、僕がですか？
This had never happened before, so I thought he was talking to someone else. But it seemed like Keiichi really was talking to me.
うん。なんか今朝は会ってからずっと退屈そうな顔をしてるからさ。ひょっとして早起きしすぎて寝不足なのか？
And there was Keiichi giving her that little bit of hope again.
前に同じ部活をやったことがあるので、またなのかと思っただけなのです。
No one would understand what I mean anyway. But Keiichi might. And so I told him how I honestly felt.
え？なんだそうなのか？なんだミオンめ。道理で手慣れてると思ったぜ。ま、俺は初めての参加だから十分楽しみだけどな。
I envied him for feeling that way. I sighed, knowing I never will.
確かに、すでに知ってる説明を延々と繰り返されると苦痛な時ってあるよな。俺も昔、塾で学校のだいぶ先まで習っててさ、遅れて習う学校が苦痛だったことがあるよ。
Keiichi didn't understand me, but I'm glad that at least he understood how frustrating it was to repeat the same situation.
そうなのです。僕も学校は特に苦痛なのですよ。
え？本当かよ。いつも楽しそうにしてるじゃないかよ。
Rika Furaday is supposed to be happy at school. That's why I act that way.
すでに知っていることを延々と聞き続けなければならないのは 拷問以外の何者でもないと思いますのです。
It's easy for me to change what Sadako cooks for dinner. I can simply volunteer to cook instead of her. But I can't change what the teacher teaches at school every day. I have no choice but to be quiet and listen to her lecture.
まあ授業はどうしようもないよな。俺はそこを塾で習ってますから、その次をやってくださいなんて名前聞いたらいろいろと怒られるもんな。でもこいつは違うぜ。遊びじゃないか。
遊びではありますが、決まってるのですよ。
わかんねえぜ。だって5択に分かれるのはくじ引きだそうじゃないか。しかもそれぞれの択で何のゲームをやるかは任意に決めることになってる。今日どんなゲームで戦わされてどんな展開で盛り上がるかなんか
Oh, I
全
wonder
然想像がつかねえぜ。
if Rika's gonna tell him exactly what it is and see if maybe he'll believe her.
予想はつきますですよ。
そんなことねえよ。
Keiichi smiled as he contradicted me. That smile seemed so ignorant to me.
くじ引きで5択に分かれますですが、部活メンバーはきれいに5択に分かれますです。圭一はあそこ。僕はそこの択なのです。そして僕は魚釣りのゲームをすることになります。圭一はすごろくの100億長者ゲームなのです。
I don't know how, but last time we were broken into 5 separate groups. It couldn't have been a coincidence. I'm sure Mion did something to ensure it would end up like that. I'm 100% sure. As for the games we play, I'm not totally sure, but if each member in the group follows the same thinking patterns, they'll probably end up making the same choices. If you roll dice many times, you begin to approach the average. One person's spontaneous act can be random, but multiple people's thoughts can be averaged out for the most part. The more people that are involved, the more difficult it is to alter the path of fate. That's why I'm pretty sure we'll end up playing the same games. Keiichi seemed surprised to hear my prediction.
なんだよそれ。予言か？よくそこまで言い切れるじゃねえか。
運命とはそういうものなのです。
へへ、運命なんて言われるとよ、意地でも抗ってみたくなるのが男ってもんだよな。
He smiled at me again. I knew that he was just smiling without reason, but I felt a small hope from him. After all, Keiichi really did shatter fate before. But that was just a miracle that happened in my previous life. I couldn't expect him to do the same thing in this one. Otherwise, I would be worn down by my high expectations again.
はい、くじ引きはこの箱の中から1枚引いて決めよう。まず部活メンバーからね。
Mion drew first, then Sadako followed. The results were the same as last time.
初戦で部活メンバーとは当たりたくねえな。もしリカちゃんと当たったらごめんよ。
当たりませんですよ。圭一の択はあそこ。僕の択はそこなのです。
ちぇ、そううまくいってたまるかよ。うりゃ。
Keiichi looked upset,
ね。僕の予言は外れないので
and
す。
she just seems so bored with it because she is.
5択の一つってことは 20% だもんな。適当に言ったってそれだけの確率で当たるってことさ。
Keiichi told me that it was just a coincidence.
なら、僕のくじも予想通りだったなら、何%の確率になりますですか？
20% の 20% だから4% だな。さすがにこの確率だったら信じてもいいぜ。
Keiichi grinned at me, believing such a chance was impossible.
さあ、最後はリカちゃんだよ。
Mion handed me the box of slips. No matter what I did, I'd be getting that table. There was a reason behind it. Mion was doing something to make sure we'd all get a different table. I thought about why Mion would do that. With the information I'd gathered about Mion over many years, I could see her reasoning.
多分、ミオンは部活のメンバーの誰かが1回戦で負けてしまったら気の毒だと思っているのでしょう。そうね。同じ卓に部活メンバーがぶつかり合ったら、どちらかのメンバーは必ず敗退することになる。
If everyone was in a different group, we'd all have a chance to move on to the second stage. That's why she was controlling this draw. I put my hand inside of the box. I could feel several folded pieces of paper inside it. But if you thought for a moment, it was odd. No matter which one I chose, I'd never get any other table.
どういう仕掛けでリカを最後の卓へ送るようにしているのですか？
Maybe Mio can control fate somehow.
さあ、それはミオンに聞かないとわからないわね。でも一つ言えるのは、多分この箱の中のどれを引いてもあの卓になると書いてあるはず。
Oh, I got it.
その箱の中には今同じくじしか入っていない？そういうことになるわね。多分ミオンの持つこの箱は何か細工がしてあるんでしょうね。
It was probably a box for a magic show or something. There could be some kind of gimmick inside the box and she can switch what's inside of it. Depending on who's drawing the paper, she'd change the lots and control the result. I didn't know exactly how, but I was sure she was doing something. I didn't even need to know how she was doing it. The most important thing was why.
みー、どれにしようか迷いますです。
さあさあ、どれを選んでも運命は一緒だよ。
She was admitting it herself. I was certain then. Based on what I felt inside, there were less than 10 pieces of paper inside of this box. In other words, there were hidden pieces of paper I couldn't touch somewhere inside the box. I smiled at Mion as I figured out her trick, but she had no clue why I was smiling.
ではこれなのです。
はいよ、どれどれ？
Oh? Oh? Oh.
すごいね。部活メン
Okay.
バーが全員きれいに分かれたよ。
I was thinking maybe something was going to change this time. Mion behaved as though this was news to her. She's such an actress. The other contestants made a dissatisfied noise. They'd have to face a club member no matter which table they got. Keiichi was surprised too. And not only because we were divided.
ね、運命は決まっていることなのです。
I smiled at him in return. Keiichi was in denial for a moment, but then he smiled back at me.
25分の1の確率で当てるとは、やるじゃねえか。
It was not. I predicted that Mion and Sadako would be at a different table, so the possibility was even lower than that. Keiichi understood that. But normal people like him can't understand the meaning of fate. That's why he put it off as a coincidence. But Keiichi, what if my prediction is right about what game you'll be playing? The possibility would be 1 in billions. Which is funny, because the game is called Billionaire. There are a lot of games in the store. What if that prediction is right too? Will he still believe it's just a coincidence? I stayed quiet in my seat and waited to see what game my group was going to decide on. They were going to choose the fishing game. I can't expect them to choose anything other than that.
期待して裏切られたらまた辛くなるものね。
One of the boys stood up. He walked toward the shelf full of games and picked up one box. He lifted the box above his head and turned around so he could show it to us. I closed my eyes as he did so, but I could still hear what he was saying.
見ろよ、これこれ。懐かしいよな。これにしねえか。知ってるよ、それ。魚がくるくる回って口をパクパクさせるのを釣るやつだろ。
I could taste the bitter chemicals from my brain and my mouth. I clenched my lips and tried to endure the numbing feeling. What a sad existence she has.
ごめん。今日は体調が悪いのかしらね。なぜかうまく受け流せないわ。
It's because she knows that it can be changed, whereas before she accepted her fate. It wasn't because I wasn't feeling well, of course. It was because of my emotions. Our powers are getting weaker and we can only rewind about 2 weeks of our lives. I was feeling that the end was near for us. In order for me to change my tragic fate, I need more time to prepare. But I can only go back 2 weeks. That means my power to resist my fate is significantly weakened. Even if I become as weak as a small leaf in the river, I should be able to do something in order to change my path. But if I can only go back to the point where I'm getting ready to be swallowed into the whirlpool, there's no chance for me to escape it. I lived for so long believing I could eventually escape my fate and survive. I believed I had a chance in every moment of every life I lived. But there are limits to those chances. There are so many limits in my repeated lives, and perhaps this might be my last chance. That may be why I'm feeling so restless.
ダメです、リカ。難しく考えれば考えるほど心に良くないのです。 わかってるわよ。ちょっと黙ってて。
My brain was numb as if surrounded by a gray mist. I was inside the crowded toy store but felt very far away from everyone else. The tighter I closed my eyes, the harder I clenched my teeth, the emptier my head became. No, 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 no.
リカ、しっかり。
As I tried to focus, I became conscious again. Hanyuu looked at me with concern. I tend to lose my mind easily right after coming back from death. I usually have more time to relax and get used to my new life, but I have no time for that now. The Watanagashi festival is only 2 weeks away. I can't just relax and wait for myself to get used to things. Don't be a wimp, Rika. Don't be a wimp. Fight against fate. But even if I do, that fate always betrays me and I grieve. What if I did the opposite? What if I didn't fight against fate? A few weeks after the Watanagashi festival of 1983, I will die because I am fated to do so. Fight, don't fight, 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 fight, don't fight. As I repeat the same words, they started to lose all meaning. I felt like I was chanting something. I bit my tongue in my mind and forced myself to stop thinking about it. I was calming down a little bit. When I opened my eyes, I saw the fishing game right in front of me, as well as my pole. Someone placed it there while I had my eyes closed. It was as if I was seeing the immovable reality of fate right in front of me. It felt like a final verdict to me. What do you think, Keiichi? This is what fate is all about. Do I want to earn his agreement or his sympathy? I stood up and walked towards Keiichi's table. His group couldn't decide on a game, so the store owner was deciding for them. Just like the last time, the store owner will pick the game of life.
やっぱり相手の提案するゲームじゃ不利だもんな。なんて言って互いの提案を蹴り合うもんだからちっとも決まりゃしねえんだ。リカちゃんの方は決まったのか？
見ればわかりますですよ。
He looked at my table and saw the fishing game there. Keiichi was surprised to see my prediction was right again. He also remembered I predicted his game too.
じゃあマスターはリカちゃんの予言した100億長者ゲームを持ってくるっていうのかよ。
僕は時々予言もできますのですよ、ミパー。
本当かよ、おい。よしよし。じゃあマスターが本当に100億長者ゲームを持ってきたなら信じてやるぜ。
そうです。ケイイチたちは100億長者ゲームで戦うことになりますです。
よしよし、そこまで言うなら勝負しようじゃねえか。あ、マスターを買収してあるなんてのはなしだぞ。
マスターが売れ残りのゲームを持ってこようと強く思っているなら必然の結果になりますのです。
I remember it was covered by dust when he gave it to them last time. Since we had to buy the game if we lost, he was trying to sell products he had a surplus of. Therefore, he won't be choosing any game at random. He'll be looking for the one with bad sales, with a strong will to do so. That will of his is going to make the pull of fate all the stronger. In that sense, there's no guarantee he'd choose the game of life specifically. He might choose something else that's also overstocked. The owner finally reappeared with a box covered in dust.
ね、言った通りなのですよ。
He has a Game of Life box in his hands. The part of me that hoped it wouldn't be the Game of Life tasted bitterness at the betrayal, but the cynical part of me that expected it to happen found it amusing in a way. I felt like my personality was twisting more and more.
マスター、どうしてそのゲームを選んだんです？
ん？いやいや、本当に気まぐれだよ。倉庫の在庫から適当に探し出したのさ。決して売れ残りの一番傷んだやつを持ってきたわけじゃないんだよ。
When he heard that the owner chose the game randomly, Keiichi shrugged his shoulders in confusion. That must be his way of surrendering.
なあ、リカちゃん、これってマジの予言なのか？
I'd be like, can you predict the lottery tickets, the lottery numbers while you're at it?
ミパー。
いやさ、村のお年寄りにリカちゃんはお社様の生まれ変わりで神通力があるって力説されたことがあるんだよ。未来の予言とかができて ものすごい的中率だとかなんとか。それって本当なのか？
I was surprised that Keiichi actually believed the superstitious stories he heard from the elderly villagers.
決まっている運命を読むだけなのです。もっと言えば、前に一度見てきた世界なのですから。
チェックソ。ここまで当てられちゃ、そんなバカなとも言えやしない。
Keiichi seemed like he was just fooling around. He probably only thinks I'm goofing around and acting haughty because my random predictions all came true. I had hope for him. I thought the owner might bring a different game because Keiichi once had the power to change fate. But that didn't happen. I'm not surprised. But I felt betrayed again. Huh. It hurts.
賭けは僕の勝ちなのですよ。
I speak to Keiichi sarcastically. I wanted him to understand that no one can change the path of fate. However, Keiichi did nothing but smile.
調子に乗るなよ、リカちゃん。運命を読めるなんていい加減なことを言っちゃいけないぜ。男にとって宿命と運命という言葉はもっともっと尊くて熱い意味がこもってるんだ。そんなやすやすと読めるようなもんじゃねえ。
I had no idea what he was trying to say, but he made me nervous. It wasn't a scary feeling. No, it was closer to hope.
さっきリカちゃんはマスターが100億長者ゲームを持ってくることを運命だと言った。偶然であったとしても的中したのだからリカちゃんが正しいと言わざるを得ないさ。でもな、こうも言ったよな。
何ですか？
What, she said it because it was the surplus and not because it was chosen at random?
俺が100億長者ゲームで戦うことも
okay.
運命だってな。
Yes, it was indeed his fate. Fate can change sometimes with uncertainty and time, but the possibility it would change in this situation was very slight. I doubted that anything would turn out differently.
なら、その運命とやらを。
Keiichi stood up in a hurry. Then he started talking to Tomata and Okumura, his group members.
すまん、俺、100億長者ゲームは持ってるんだよ。だから、ルールの裏の裏まで知り尽くしてる。
そうなんですか？
ああ。だから、このセレクトはフェアじゃないよな。マスター、申し訳ないんですけど、100億長者ゲームの隣に置いてあった他のゲームに変えてもらえませんか？
そうかい？わかったよ。じゃあ他のを持ってこよう。
The owner picked up the game of life again and took it back into storage. As I remained there in shock, he returned with a game called Pop-Up Pirate.
これならどうかな？
あの樽にナイフを刺すゲームですよね。
どうだよ、二人とも。これならフェアだろ？
そうですね。ルールもわかりやすいし、それにしましょう。
じゃあ決まり。俺たちの卓はこれで勝負だ。
Keiichi winked at me as I stood there with my mouth open. It looked like he had just forcefully changed my prediction. But for me, it's not that simple. It was supposed to be fate. That's why the owner brought the game of life to their table. They were supposed to play that game. That's what happened the last time. That's what was supposed to happen. But he just changed the fate in front of my eyes like it was nothing. It's as if someone asked me to stand an egg on its end. And as I struggled to do so, Keiichi forcefully cracked the egg and made it stand up in front of me. I should have had a far greater power than Keiichi. But why was I feeling so weak? Was it because I wasn't trying to fight against fate so I wouldn't get hurt? Because I was going with the flow without trying too hard? What was I thinking?
リカちゃんさ、さっきすっげえつまらなさそうな顔してたよな。それってあれだろ？魚釣りゲームじゃ嫌だなって不安が的中しちゃってふてくされてたんだろ？
Where he's saying it's like you fight fate too. If you don't want to play the fishing game, then pick something else.
そうね。
Something so simple to him.
今さら隠さない。
じゃあ簡単じゃないか。
So I'm a witch who's been living for more than 100 years? So I thought I was better than everyone just because I can see the paths of fate? That's stupid. I really am so stupid. Keiichi tapped me on the back. He was urging me to return to my table. The sensation of his touch filled up my heart with emotion. I wasn't going to stand idly by anymore. I thought I couldn't cheat fate. I thought 2 weeks wasn't enough. But Keiichi just defied his fate in a matter of 5 minutes.
僕は魚釣りゲームはお魚さんがかわいそうだと思いますので、他のゲームにしたいのですよ。
The other people at my table looked at me with confused expressions. Their reactions were scaring me. Right at that moment, I could really feel that I was facing the impenetrable wall of fate. Even so, I have nothing to be scared of.
そっか。じゃあリカちゃんは何がいい？リカちゃんの提案する他のゲームでいいよ。
They accepted my suggestion and gave up on the fishing game so easily. That's right, I used to be much more aggressive before. But I became so tired and bitter and mean. I gave in to fate. But I'm not going to yield anymore. Keiichi taught me that. He didn't have any memories from his previous life, but Keiichi was still Keiichi. He'd never give in to fate.
久しぶりに運命と戦おうという気力が充実するのを感じるわ。やる気があれば、ものの5分でだって運命は変えられる。それが2週間もあるんだもの。今回はこれまでとは違う。もっともっと運命と戦ってみせる。頑張りましょうなのです。
In contrast to my motivation, Hanyuu was wearing a sad expression. Alright guys, so that will do it for episode 1 of this chapter. A little bit of a longer episode than I was expecting, but I got kind of into it. So I hope you enjoyed this long episode, and definitely some interesting concepts that we're getting into. This Hanyuu character who's been hinted at throughout the past few chapters. We're finally getting to actually see her. The whole time travel thing, we're getting into that. I'm hoping we will get some answers in this chapter. And it seems like the whole idea behind this chapter is about, you know, actually being able to change your fate and, you know, your destiny. It's not written in the stars. You can change things if you try hard enough. So we'll see. Will Rika escape her fate in this chapter or not? I'm definitely interested to find out. Once again, guys, thank you so much for watching, and I hope to catch you in the next one. Bye.